Point Pleasant Park is a 75-hectare urban forest located at the southern tip of the Halifax Peninsula. It is one of the city's most valued green spaces, providing recreational opportunities and important habitat that supports biodiversity and ecosystem health. The park also holds deep cultural significance for the Mi'kmaq people, who historically gathered there for 7 days following the first full moon of spring during a period known as the Frog Croaking Month. The park holds cultural importance to this date. On September 29, 2003, Hurricane Juan made landfall in Nova Scotia, causing widespread damage across the Halifax region, including severe destruction within Point Pleasant Park. The park produced sustained winds of approximately 151 kilometers per hour and is considered the most damaging storm to impact the region since 1893. Because the forest consisted of mature, even-aged trees growing in shallow soils, it was particularly vulnerable to strong winds. As a result, more than 880,000 trees were uprooted or broken, dramatically altering the structure and composition of the forest. While devastating, this disturbance created a rare opportunity to study how a mature urban forest responds to large-scale disturbance. This event marked the beginning of secondary succession in Point Pleasant Park and provided the foundation for evaluating forest recovery through secondary succession. The objective of this study was to evaluate long-term forest recovery in Point Pleasant Park following the large-scale disturbance caused by Hurricane Juan in 2003. Recovery was assessed using 3 key ecological indicators: total tree density, average tree size measured as diameter at breast height or DBH, and species richness. Total density was used to evaluate changes in the overall structure and regeneration of the forest community. Diameter at breast height provides information about changes in tree size and stand development over time, which reflects forest maturation. Species richness was used as a measure of community diversity to determine whether the number of tree species increased as the forest recovered. Our analysis focused on 3 main research questions. First, how was the overall forest community changed over time since Hurricane Juan, and what patterns of recovery are evident? Second, how have the densities of dominant species changed between the early post-disturbance period and more recent years? And third, how has the selected community metric changed over time, and what does this indicate about ecosystem recovery? For each of these questions, we considered the ecological mechanisms driving the observed trends and used succession theory to predict how the forest community is expected to change as it moves towards a more mature or climax condition. Together, these analyses allow us to evaluate whether the forest is progressing through secondary succession and to assess the extent of recovery more than 2 decades after the disturbance.
For this lab, Biology 2060 students collected data on the trees of Point Pleasant Park in one of the 6 study sites displayed in this image. After the park was surveyed in 2004, it was determined that the hurricane impacted forest structure the most in these locations. These sites are therefore the most relevant to our study on forest regeneration following the hurricane. 6 sites were selected to allow for the assessment of commonalities and trends across the park. The sites were 20 meters by 20 meters to provide an accurate picture of the biodiversity in each location while allowing for efficient and time-effective data collection. The data was collected in the same forest plots every year since 2004, excluding 2005, 2007, 2016, and 2020 due to Hurricane Ophelia, Hurricane Noel, Hurricane Matthew, and the COVID-19 pandemic, respectively. In each study site, all living trees greater than 2.5 centimeters in diameter were identified with the species guide, and their species were recorded. As the study is looking at long-term biodiversity changes, measurements concerning trees that were immature or dead were not necessary. The trees selected were considered developed enough for the study. Using a diameter measuring tape, these trees were measured at breast height similarly to what we see in Figure 2. Diameter at breast height, or DBH, can give an estimate of the amount of wood in a stand of trees and is widely used by the logging industry. It is helpful to use the industry standard, as in the future we could compare our results to the industry data or integrate industry data into our research. The collected data was formatted and analyzed in Excel. The total species density, richness, diversity, maximum diversity, and evenness across each site was calculated using the species data. The average size for each species at each site was calculated using the diameter data. We performed linear regression to analyze this data. Linear regression is used to compare the effects of one variable on another. For this research, linear regression will indicate the relationship between variables such as species richness or density and time. By analyzing the trend of these relationships over time, linear regression allows us to make predictions about the future of Point Pleasant Park. For example, an R-squared value of 0.9 between species richness and time indicates a high level of correlation, so we could predict that species richness will increase in coming years.
To answer our first research question, we examined how the overall forest community has changed over time using total tree density as our indicator of forest structure. Our null hypothesis stated that there would be no significant change in total tree density in Point Pleasant Park over time following Hurricane Juan, while the alternative hypothesis predicted that density would change significantly over time as the forest recovered. This graph shows the linear regression of total tree density from 2004 to 2025, with each point representing the number of trees per 400 meters squared measured annually across 6 study sites. The regression equation is y equals 7.93x minus 15894, meaning density increased by approximately 7.93 trees per 400 meters squared per year. The r-squared value of 0.45 indicated 45% of the variation in total density is explained by time, which represents a moderate relationship for ecological field data. The p-value for this regression is 3.9 times 10 to the negative 13, which is far below the significant threshold of 0.05. Therefore, we reject the null hypothesis and conclude that total tree density has increased significantly over time since Hurricane Juan. Ecologically, this increase is consistent with patterns of secondary succession. The hurricane created canopy gaps that increased light availability and reduced competition, promoting seedling establishment and regeneration. As succession continues, density is expected to stabilize or decline slightly due to self-thinning, where larger trees outcompete the smaller individuals. Because density is still increasing, these results suggest that Point Pleasant Park is currently in mid-successional stage and has not reached a climax community.
To evaluate the changes in density of the codominant species red spruce and red maple, we used linear regression analysis. Our null hypothesis stated that the density of red maple and red spruce has not shown significant change over time and that P-loose evenness remains constant from 2004 to 2025. The alternative hypothesis states that the density has increased over time with a decreasing P-loose evenness. In the first figure, the positive slope of the linear regression lines demonstrates that the density of both the red maple and red spruce are gradually increasing over time. The low p-value indicates significant evidence against the null hypothesis, showing further evidence of the relationship between density and time. During the early stages of succession, the lack of canopy density encouraged the growth of shade-intolerant pioneer species such as red maple, paper birch, and American mountain ash. As these species begin to fill the canopy, shade-tolerant and late successional species like the red spruce will follow. This is consistent with the recorded observations, as we can see that the red maple is far more abundant in terms of density, and the red spruce is growing in abundance but has a smaller population. The low R-squared values indicate a large proportion of variability over the years, which can be related to the high heterogeneity of urban forests or human disturbance. However, the overall trend still indicates gradual population growth. In Figure 7.2, we can see that over the regrowth period, we've observed a decline in P-loose evenness, which measures how evenly distributed the species are in a community. The p-value shows moderate evidence against the null hypothesis, indicating that P-loose evenness decreased over time. The negative slope of the trend line demonstrates the slight decline in the relative abundance of species as key species like the red maple and red spruce become more dominant. As the urban forest moves towards its climax community, we can predict that the population of red maples will stabilize, closing the canopy. This will create a forest floor with little sunlight, encouraging the continued growth of red spruce trees as they are a shade-tolerant climax species in Acadian forests.
Shannon diversity is calculated by finding the proportion of each species in a community, multiplying each proportion by its natural logarithm, summing these values, and taking the negative of the total. Higher values indicate greater species diversity. The null hypothesis in this analysis is that species diversity has not changed in Point Pleasant from 2004 to 2025, while the alternative hypothesis is that species diversity has changed. To examine how the changes in Point Pleasant's Shannon diversity from 2004 to 2025 have occurred, linear regression was performed, as we can see in Figure 10. The linear regression analysis with degrees of freedom 1 and 82, an F statistic of 39.7, and a p-value of p equals 1.4 times 10 to the negative 8 demonstrate that time is a significant predictor of diversity. As the p-value is less than 0.05, we can reject the null hypothesis, meaning that there is a statistically significant relationship between time and Shannon diversity. The regression equation and positive trend line with a slope of 0.0555 demonstrate that this correlation is positive and linear. The correlation is weak with an R-squared value of 0.3262. As mentioned previously, Point Pleasant Park suffered over 70% canopy loss during Hurricane Juan in fall of 2003, but natural regeneration is occurring following the disturbance. The regenerating vegetation consists mainly of native species emerging from local seed and propagal sources with minimal presence of non-native species. Shannon diversity may initially continue to increase as the forest continues to recover in future years, allowing for more niches to be formed and more species to become integrated into the ecosystem. This is likely a reflection of mid-secondary successional recovery following the disturbance. Over longer timescales, diversity could stabilize or slightly decline if late successional species become dominant and competition reduces the proportion of less dominant species. It is important to note that as humans modify the global environment more now than ever, new nuances are being added to the original theory of succession. For example, a recent study shows that even climax communities, changes in what resources are available may shift the balance of the species composition over time, even without a formal future disturbance.
Following Hurricane Juan, Point Pleasant Park experienced severe disruption to the canopy. The red spruce and red maple populations have since gradually increased, resulting in the slight decline in P-loose constant and rise in Shannon diversity. Over the course of 20 years, the urban forest has transitioned from early stages of succession where shade-intolerant species like red maple have thrived towards a mid-successional phase, encouraging the growth of more shade-tolerant species like the red spruce. This ecosystem presents a WD8 vegetation type, which is characterized by red spruce and red maple co-dominance in a low elevation and moist setting, which is consistent with the coastal location of Point Pleasant and of Acadian forests in mid-succession. As Point Pleasant is an urban forest, it faces human-related challenges like soil compaction and poor management. Soil compaction threatens soil health and tree species richness as it starves the roots of essential nutrients, oxygen, and water. This explains the high variability in density of trees as is represented by the low R-squared values in Figures 6, 7.1, and 7.2. Improper management can create an unsustainable forest, making management plans essential to ensuring the success of regeneration. The Point Pleasant Park's management plan encompasses a variety of methods in forest growth: protecting habitat by limiting activity, encouraging mixed-age structures, and favoring shade-tolerant species. This enables tree regeneration and ensures its success. Two-eyed seeing is a Mi'kmaq teaching that was introduced to the academic community by elders Alver and Merdina Marshall. It applies the use of multiple perspectives to guide thoughtful decisions and bring together Indigenous and Western knowledge. In doing so, we can create a future that reflects shared values and care for the land. Another Indigenous teaching that I think is valuable to how we manage our urban forests is the 7th generation principle. It focuses on ensuring a sustainable future for 7 generations to come by creating and maintaining healthy relationships with the land and each other. This image is representative of the 7 generations and the thread that binds them together, reminding us of our interconnectedness and dependency on each other. Making decisions that secure sustainable practices around energy, water, and natural resource management will support a healthy and resilient society for generations to come. Thank you.
Climate change is expected to increase in both frequency and intensity of the storms, which could have important effects on the long-term stability of Point Pleasant Park. Stronger storms can cause tree windthrow, where trees are uprooted and snapped by the wind. We saw an example of this during Hurricane Juan in 2003, where large numbers of trees were damaged or destroyed in the park. If storms occur more often in the future, the forest may not have enough time to fully recover between separate disturbance events. Recovery in forest ecosystems can take decades, so repeated disturbances can slow down regeneration drastically and negatively alter the structure of the forest. Over time, this could also lead to changes in species composition. Species that are more tolerant in disturbance or grow quickly may become more dominant, while others decline. Increased storm damage can also create more canopy gaps, which changes light availability, soil condition, and competition amongst plants. In conclusion, more frequent and intense storms could make the forest ecosystem less stable in the long term by increasing disturbance and changing the structure and composition of the forest community.
Point Pleasant Park is located on the coast with areas containing intertidal and subtidal algae, mussels, and other aquatic biodiversity. Most of the intertidal area is rocky or gravelly, and the park's highest elevation is near the center, which creates natural surface runoff through trails and other forested areas. Coastal areas experience stronger winds than inland regions due to lower terrain and land-sea interactions. Stronger winds due to Point Pleasant's coastal location can cause greater tree damage and may slow recovery by reducing the survival of young, regenerating trees and seedlings in the early stages of recovery. Hurricanes also lead to saltwater intrusion and storm surge flooding in coastal ecosystems. Saltwater intrusion occurs when seawater moves into freshwater soils or groundwater, where storm surge flooding happens when strong hurricane winds push ocean water onto land, temporarily flooding coastal ecosystems. Both processes are likely to have occurred during the hurricane, which have the potential to slow forest regeneration by increasing the salinity of the soil and stressing the vegetation that was in the park at the time. Overall, however, forest response following hurricanes is shaped by an interaction of multiple factors specific not just to the site's location but also the life history of all the species involved.
As the forest regenerates and the structure and diversity of the ecosystem increase, new ecological niches appear. During the early stages of succession, fallen trees and exposed soil create niches for pioneer mosses called the bryophyte layer, which contains species like haircap moss and hypnum moss. These organisms help retain moisture and nutrients to encourage new plant growth. Closer to the shoreline, where there's high wind exposure, niches are dominated by mid-successional vegetation type, with salt-tolerant and wind-resistant species like the white spruce, which protect less tolerant inland trees like the balsam fir. During mid-succession, the growing canopy creates a shaded understory niche that benefits shade-tolerant species like the sugar maple, yellow birch, eastern hemlock, and red spruce. As density and diversity increase, the forest provides habitat niches for many animals, including generalist species like red squirrels and raccoons, as well as reptiles, amphibians, and a wide variety of insects.
We would like to acknowledge the many individuals and groups who contributed to this work. First, we thank the Biology 2060 students at Dalhousie University who collected long-term field data in Point Pleasant Park. We thank our classmates and group members who pre-reviewed our work and offered their helpful insight. We also acknowledge Dr. Allison Schmidt for her role in overseeing data collection, statistical analysis, data organization, and the preparation of graphs used in this study. We are grateful to Dalhousie University as well as the professors and teaching assistants for their guidance and support throughout this project. We are truly grateful to the flora and fauna of Point Pleasant Park, which made this research possible. Finally, we acknowledge that this work takes place on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people, and we recognize the importance of their ongoing relationship with this land. Thank you.